Okay, guys, here we go. The final stretch of the course. We're going to do the whole face and then shade it. So, first things first, you guys, I'm sure, are pros at drawing that keystone, the center of it all. Okay, so we got our keystone, right? Let's just go ahead and draw our two lines coming down. Now, I'm going to go over again in graphite. I just wanted to do this in red just to show you guys, how I usually work, and I encourage you guys to, think about using maybe a colored pencil to start a drawing in the future, and then going over with graphite. Okay, so we got those. Bringing that down, remember we're going to then draw the triangle in there at the bottom. Wings of the keystone, two little guys coming off the side. Now again, guys, don't worry if you're making your keystone too big or the wings too small, because you're always going to draw these elements in your future face drawings. Always, always. So this is all about kind of memorizing this approach, this technique, and then later on you can just fudge with the sizes, right? You can play with the sizes as you go, but these are always going to be there. So this is going to provide you guys a very strong foundation for not only drawing faces, but really anything in the future. You can apply this to any kind of drawing. Now, remember, we're going to really cut these lines right here, and then add the triangle. Now remember, in the first video, I kind of went a bit too far for the drawing as a whole. Remember, that's all connected, right? So I just want to be a little bit more mindful. I don't want the nose to be as long as it was in the first drawing, so that's why I kind of cut it off right here. You can play the measurement game if you want, literally using your two fingers and count, okay, there's one keystone, 2, 3, 4, or 3.5. That's a great way to kind of measure out your drawings with your fingers. But we are just drawing basic shapes here. So we got the underside of the nose, right? You can even just lightly shade that in. So we're going to kind of shade as we go, because it allows us to just kind of shake it up a little bit, right? We don't always have to do the line drawing and then shade. We can start, indicating shading as we go. This isn't full-on shading, it's just indication, right? And then this is where you can decide, okay, well, is my keystone too big to the nose? Maybe you have a photo up, maybe you're drawing someone, maybe you're looking at yourself in the mirror, and you're thinking, well, my keystone, or the picture I'm looking at, isn't as large compared to the nose, right? So this is where we can make decisions. And I'm thinking, okay, I want to make my keystone a little bit smaller here. Just literally cut it down from the top. If you like where your keystone is, then you don't have to do what I'm doing. You can just continue refining. Again, you can see I'm pivoting on my palm here, and I'm kind of what some artists call ghosting the line before I draw it in. You see what I'm doing here? I'm not drawing. I'm just kind of mimicking the direction of the line, and then I throw down a line. There's all these fun little, gymnastics, as it were, of drawing. Okay, so remember, underneath that nose, we're going to draw a triangle of the lip. Underneath that lip, we're going to draw the curve of the lip. And remember, you can connect them, but always remember that the connections of the lower lip don't connect, in such a defined way. Remember that we have the two parts, and they kind of just fade off. But of course, always pull up reference and look in the mirror. Remember the little rectangle under the lip, like that. And then I can indicate in just the curve of the chin like that, ever so subtly. Now, you don't always have to go in this order. You could have done your keystone, your wings, and then your eyes, and then, and then the nose. Again, don't worry that you have to go in this order. This was just the order I was kind of flowing into. A big part of drawing is the flow of it. Okay, remember how we did the eyes in the first video? We basically mimicked this shape, this center C that we called it, or you can call it a bracket, really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to mimic that one side and the other. We're going to do, of course, 2 eyes on our face. So something like that. Again, we're just in the game of measuring here. Now you can decide, okay, I still want my nose shorter, or I want it longer, right? This is where you make those changes. So I'm just going to kind of keep it as it is now, and I can still change it later. So remember, we're going to kind of mimic that C shape or that bracket shape underneath the top eyelid. So this is the lower eyelid. Now I'm going to do the left one. Something like that. Remember, we just want to be able to fit one eye in between. Okay. Now remember, that top eyelid is going to kind of mimic that initial C we drew in, and maybe get a little bit thinner at the edges, right? See here, it's a bit thin right here, and then it goes thick, and then, so you just want to play with, the thickness and thinness of certain shapes. Okay, so something like that. Now I'm going to basically draw in the eyebrows. And of course, this is going to tell the expression. So if you want your character to have a bit more of a serious face, well, then you're going to adjust these eyebrows. Remember, the keystone changes with the expression. So I still want to kind of make this keystone a bit shorter. Again, it's totally fine. You can see that, I'm constantly making adjustments as I go, and I've been doing this a very long time. So don't feel that you have to get it right away. The whole point is exploration and adjusting as you go. So I'm thinking, maybe a bit more of a sly expression or something like that. The point is, I'm giving just slight variations to the eyebrows, just slight. Now this is looking more like a male character, but again, that can change as well. I'm thinking of maybe the distance from the eyes to the bottom of the nose is giving it a bit more of a masculine quality, but that's not always the case. Okay, so now I'm going to do the indications of the lower eyelid. Again, mimicking my first line, something like that. Remember the 2 lines that connect on the outside, like that. So 1, 2, and we can just draw these outer lines all the way down. Because it's not a line, that you see on a face there, but there is a connection. Again, it's all connected. Now with the cheekbones come a bit outside of those lines. So you see the bit of a gap here. Some people's cheekbones are larger than others. So we can play with that distance. But some kind of indication like that. And this is where we can really kind of hit at, okay, are we drawing a male or a female? Doing more of a square jaw. I'll do one round jaw on this side. and then one square on this side, so you could kind of see the difference. You can basically tell, okay, well, this one's going a bit more masculine because of this length of the nose and this angle, right? So again, decide, okay, do you want to draw a male or female right now? Not that this can't be a male with this curved jaw. But you know what? I'm just going to go with female. So making that decision, of course, is going to affect everything. And again, we have erasers. We can erase things out. Remember the chin? You can just draw in like an ellipse shape like that. An egg shape, an ellipse shape. Okay. Remember the two lines we did. Now we're not going to draw the top of the head. We're just doing the face, right? Head drawing, that's going to be a future course, because things change when you start to do the whole head and you start to turn the head. You can still apply everything I'm teaching you here, but things change. Things, take on a whole new dimension. So just doing the face here. And if you want, you can continue. I'm not going to continue the top of the head, but you can in your drawing. And for the ears, if you want to think of, again, like another C shape on the side, like that. Again, just blocking in shapes at this point. There's no detail at this stage. Okay, so now I basically have the whole head, actually face. I'm going to zoom in just ever so slightly, and now we're going to go in for round 2. So I want to focus on the eyes in this next stage. Okay, so I'm going to start with the right eye. Now remember, we have our little tear duct, something like that. Remember, it just kind of comes right off of this part of the upper lid, right there. So a good rule to think of in all this is, you do one thing on one side and then you repeat it on the other. So I'm just going to come over here and repeat that little shape. Now, since we're drawing the face straight on, these are going to line up. So, I even noticed here I drew this a little higher. So let's just, for simplicity's sake, I can even draw a line coming right across from tear duct to tear duct. And even I can do it all across, the lower lids, the upper lids, just to basically line up one eye to the other. Doesn't mean the eyes are going to be exactly the same. You actually don't want that. Every eye is different from the other to some small degree, and I'll show you guys how to implement that. So remember the little notch that comes right outside of the tear duct. Hopefully you guys remember that this is the indication of the skull. Now again, it's just like a little arrow pointing inwards. And you can see it kind of breaks into the sides of the nose. Again, these lines here that we drew straight down, they're just indications. They're just kind of border lines of how all this is. But essentially, there is no line. There is, like in the Matrix, there is no spoon. There is no lines here. This break does happen, and then but these imaginary lines still continue down. So don't worry that you broke into your nose, outer nose lines with these little arrows, because that's kind of what happens. Okay, so now blocking off the little tear ducts. So now we have basically they're basically these mini trapezoidal shapes. Again, the trapezoid being the shape of the keystone. If you really want to experiment with a drawing with all trapezoidal shapes you can. I mean, I can even make the wings of this keystone trapezoidal. Again, your standard trapezoid is that, right? It's a square with either the top or the bottom tapered in. Remember, the keystone gets a little bit of shadow, little bit. You don't want it to seem like there's a unibrow going across. Not that there's anything wrong with unibrows, but it's just a subtle indication of shadow. Okay. Now with the upper eyelids, again, I'm going to now break it up into 3 parts. Remember the first video where we drew the upper eyelids? We're just going off of our initial brackets that we did, the C bracket shape. So now I have three parts. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do the same over here. 1, 2, 3. And then down into the tear ducts right there. Now this lid here is, I made it a little bit lower than this one. Everyone has, I'm not going to say a lazy eye, but lids are just different on everyone. And the more different you make them, the more personality, the more character the drawing has, ever so subtly. Now I'm going to continue with the bottom lids. Remember our little ledge, right? Our little ledge. The further you pull out of a drawing, meaning the first drawing we did was a very close-up, you still see this ledge. So essentially, we're not going to see it, and because I'm going to make this a female character, we don't see the upper ledge. I'm actually going to, start darkening that right now. And I'm going to do the same on this side. Remember, you do one thing on one side, and then you do it to the other side, just to give it a sense of symmetry. Not perfect symmetry, but just symmetry. Okay, so the little ledge on the bottom lid, it's very subtle. Don't make it too big, but it is noticeable even at this distance away. Okay, so let's block in the irises. Now remember, they're going to be a perfect circle from this front-on view. And we don't want to show the whole thing because we're not doing a surprised or scared character. So you can see I just kind of drew one right there. And remember, you want to be able to fit half of an iris to one side and then half to the other. Meaning if I cut this iris in half like that, I could fit one half over here and then one half over here. So this is where you decide, okay, this is the size of my iris needs to be at least this big, as long as I can fit one half into the other. And then the same over here. Of course, this needs to be the same size as that. So again, you can measure, like I can measure one finger. It's about the size of my nail here. And I can just kind of come over here and just, mark it. Whatever you can do to measure using your fingers or your pencil, it's fine. It doesn't matter. You don't have to use a ruler. You can just use what you have right in front of you. So something like this, again, I have an eraser, things can change, but that's totally fine. Okay. Now let's just go ahead and get the pupil in there. Now remember, we're going to draw the pupil as a C. So we're going to leave a spot open for the highlight. So essentially, we have a lot of C's going on this page. Curved C's, kind of angled C's. So you can see they're basically two C's, C, C. And then on the upper right, we'll go with the top right lighting scenario, meaning that the upper right of the pupil, we draw a little circle, and that's our little highlight. So you can see how much life that brings to the face, just by kind of adding in like 3/4 of an iris, and then the pupil. Go ahead and, maybe color in or darken in, rather, your pupil. Like that. Now let's go ahead and shade the upper half of the iris. I'm going to start with the right one. Now remember, we have light coming from the top, so it's putting a little bit of shadow on the upper part of that iris. So I'm just darkening the upper part, and then I'm kind of easing up as I go down. So dark at the upper part, and then ease off the pencil as you go down. You see how much life that gives that. So it's these very simple techniques that we do. When we compound them, they start really adding a lot of life. So I'm going to do the same here. So I'm going to kind of do one side of the iris and then ease up as I go down, the other side, ease up as I go down. Now, because we're a bit farther away, remember the detail we did in our close-up eye in the first video? We had the little squiggly lines happening. You don't necessarily have to do that here, but you totally can. Meaning, well, I'm just going to draw in my squiggly lines. Just very rough, very faint. Remember, these are squiggly lines that are emanating from an imaginary center point at the center of the pupil. So you can see, you can barely see it in there, but it's essentially squiggly lines. Okay, so now that I have this, now I'm thinking about, okay, I want to do the bottom of the nose. Now remember, every nose has a ball, whether it's very pronounced or not even pronounced at all, but there is cartilage here. Not to get too anatomically correct, but drawing in that kind of ball right here. Now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, this nose is definitely too long for what I want for this drawing, and so of course I can change it here. So this is why we draw in lightly. In the beginning, we block things out so we could change as we go. See, I want to bring all this up a little bit. I want to bring it up to about here. And if that doesn't work, then I can change it still. So if I bring that up, then of course I'm bringing all this up. We want to leave a little bit of a gap between the underside of the nose and the top of the lip, of course. And I'm just going to add in a little bit of a smile, make our character, just a little, not super happy, but just content, confident. You see the power of the little kind of notches at the end that go up, that kind of give your character a change of expression. It's the power of the subtlety in the human face. Okay, so now I got this ball here. Go back to the nose. I know I kind of jump around, and that, again, that's fine. You want to explore your drawing. You want to dance around it. You want to play with it. There are no strict rules other than the rules that I've been giving you guys. But you learn the rules, right, and then you break them. Learn them and then break them. Okay, so now I have the ball of this nose, which then that's going to tell me, okay, the nostrils come right outside of, that ball of the nose on either side. Something like that. And of course I'm going to shade in the underside of the nose, just to give that sense of shadow. So you can see how much you can get away with in this scenario right here of the nose, where you have, remember, there's 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you indicate those 4 parts and shade in the lower part, and then add in the nostrils inside of that lower part, the triangle underneath the nose, it's very effective, incredibly effective. And then from then you can decide, okay, I like my nose in relation to the eyes, in relation to the mouth, and all we're doing is just very basic shapes with some very basic indications. So I kind of like where everything is, and now I can feel confident in adding more detail. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the lips and shade in that upper lip like we did in the previous video. Start to add those form lines to the lower lip. Remember, these lines are curving. You know, those are going in that direction, and these are going in this direction. The ones in the center are kind of more coming at us. Remember, we can add in, remember those two shapes in the lip. Again, these are very subtle, but I can just lightly just sketch them in. Two different kind of sets of muscles right there. And then you have the skin that goes over it. So again, it's very subtle. You don't have to have them in there, but I'm now shading in the darker parts of the lower lip now. Remember, the upper part is going to be more in light, so I can start erasing that out. Okay. Now the bottom of the lower lip, we have that little notch, right? A little divot that gets some shadow. Now you can play with the shape. It doesn't have to stay totally rectangular. And it really depends on, you know, the thickness of that lip. Because that lip is what's casting the shadow. That lip is what's making this part dark. And again, it doesn't have to be crazy super dark. Okay. Now, one more thing I'm going to add here is just an indication of the muscle group underneath the lips. And so the line we made for that chin, right? That curved line, you can just kind of bring it out ever so slightly right here. So I did one right here, and then one right here. You can see it's a little kind of curve. Again, it looks like another C shape. That's kind of doing that. Now, on some people, you'll notice it's very pronounced. Other people, it's barely there, barely. So I'm just letting you guys know that there is a place for some kind of indication right here between the lips and the bottom of the face. So just know that you can put in a shape like this, and there's subtle shading that's happening there, but that's all I'm going to do for that. So basically, you know, we started with the eyes and went down to the mouth, down to the bottom. Now I'm going to go back to the eyes and just kind of wrap this up. And I'm going to add now the dark. Now, this is where I can really kind of push the expression. So remember this, the eyebrow. I'm going to start with an eyebrow here. So now she's got this kind of confident look going. Remember, the eyebrow can cut into the keystone. Keystone is just this kind of imaginary place where we start from. But when you guys start looking at more photographs and looking at yourself in the mirror, you're going to see that keystone all the time. You'll never unsee the keystone. Okay, so we got an eyebrow going like this. I'm going to have this one over here kind of more, a bit more straight. Like this one has an angle, right? I want to make this one just a bit more straight. Remember, grouping in the eyebrows. When you do it in this kind of way that I'm doing here, it's kind of faking the hair system, as it were. So I'm going in the direction of the hair with my pencil and putting a few little stragglers up at the top. I'm just making sure, see, I cut into the keystone equally on both sides. So this one has cut into the keystone, you know, a few percentage, right? And I want to do kind of the same thing right here. And then come down on the side like that. Again, all eyebrows are different. Some will end shorter, some will turn sharper. Look at some reference, look at your own eyebrows, and just play with them. So remember this, the wing of the keystone, that can get some shadow, even more heavy-handed shadow, all the way up until that eyelid. you know, treating these little groups, these little planes with their own lighting, it's going to make your drawing really structural, really pop. Okay, so I'm going to get into the right eyelid. And again, I'm just kind of going over the lines I already have. You know, you spend the time in kind of structuring your drawing and analytically thinking about it, and then you can just kind of have fun with it and just go over what you already drew. Remember, grouping the eyelashes into a group. I'm going to do the bottom eyelashes while I'm in eyelash mode. And they're going to be, of course, thinner than the top. So remember, group them all in, especially if you're doing makeup, and then you can do just a few stragglers here or there, like that. Okay. Now with the tear duct, again, remember we have a few little forms going on in there, just adding a bit of shading in there, and then indicating the little notch of the skull right there. Again, just a little arrow, looks like two arrows pointing in. Okay, now to the iris. Remember, the iris has that kind of dark outline, but it's soft, so you don't have to go too sharp with that. I'm going to darken in that pupil, leave the highlight as a white circle. And you can see how really things are starting to pop by adding and reinforcing the darks. I'm going to, of course, darken in the upper half of the iris and then kind of fade it out as it goes down. I can reinforce some squiggly lines if I want. Now remember that eyeball, right? That needs to get a little bit of shading like we did in the shading section. So I'm just kind of hitting at right underneath the eyelid, and then I'm easing up as I go down. It's ever so subtle. I'm going to add in that little inner ledge. Don't forget to sharpen your pencils when you need to, get very, very fine detail. So something like that. And then the lower lid, I'm just going to reinforce. Not too heavy-handed, but, you know, because I want my character to be, you know, have a little bit of eyeshadow on. Well, then we can just darken the lids. Remember, parts of the lids that are facing the light aren't going to be as dark. See, that's why I left a little gap in the middle of that top right eyelid. Okay. So of course you would do the same here as you do here. I'm not going to do that in this video, just to kind of want to leave the drawing like this to kind of show the progression of things. Okay, so let's just say that, you know, both sides of the nose are just kind of equally shaded, as it were. Again, I don't want to go too heavy-handed with this. I just want these two sides to be a bit darker than the center. Now that center, remember, we can play with the lines. I'm going to go kind of in like this. Again, all noses are different. I mean, you can fill up hundreds of sketchbooks with just noses because the variants are pretty incredible. So, you know, these are kind of going in like this, and then when it comes down to the ball at the end, I'm kind of giving angles to the bottom of the ball of the nose, because this happens in a lot of noses. You know, we have the ball here, right? But then angles at the bottom. And then basically there's the point where it just kind of ends, right? And then you have the nostrils. And then let's just do the outer parts of the nostrils as well. Again, they're just kind of falling in where that triangle is. You see here, I'm just reinforcing the underside of that triangle, and then I'm kind of coming up right here. You don't want to go too heavy-handed in this area, especially on a female character. It can, basically, if that's all you do, that's perfect. That's great. I really don't need to do anything more to that. Okay, so now going to the lips. Remember, I'm going to cut in to the top part of that lip. Remember what it was called? Yes, Cupid's bow. So we had the Cupid's bow. You can add in a couple little lines here. Make sure you're very subtle. Remember, this is the philtrum, this little indentation in there. I'm going to go ahead and erase out my upper lip there. Of course, you don't want to get too heavy-handed with the philtrum because it'll look like a mustache. And nothing wrong with mustaches, but if you don't want your characters to have mustaches, don't go too heavy-handed with the philtrum. Okay. Now I'm going to add, remember we started with angles, we can add in curves. So I'm going to add in a curve to that upper lip. Make it look really like a bow. Okay. Now the indentation right here in the lip. Now these aren't on all lips. Sometimes it just goes straight across, but again, I'm just looking for areas to add in variation. I'm going to go ahead and darken in. Again, we're just reinforcing a lot of the things that we kind of set up. Okay. Now this is where I can add in the two parts of the lower lip. When you get into very detailed technical drawings and highly realistic faces, this little ledge here, and this is called many names in, anatomy, lip technical anatomy, but we can just call it a ridge. There's another ridge at the top lip, meaning it just kind of hovers right above the top lip, and it's kind of highly reflected. Again, just knowing that that's there, you can see here it's kind of not necessarily working. It only works when you start to really get into shading. But that bottom lip and the bottom ridge, if we can just indicate it like so in our drawings, remember it tapers out and then just kind of fades off. We can just indicate those things. It's just going to be a bit more realistic. Now, you want to be subtle with it, though. Even in this, I've gone a little heavy-handed with it. But again, we have a form, the lower lip, and it is kind of going more into shadow as it curves around. You can reinforce your lip wrinkle lines. And then at the bottom, a new form emerges. I'm just drawing form lines around it just so you guys can see what that form is. But again, always look at reference. Look in the mirror, look at reference, and just kind of, ask yourself some questions like, where is the light in this photo? What is this form doing? What is it doing there? So something like that is going to work. Now I'm going to reinforce this shadow here. And just ever so slightly just hit at this little area. Again, look at some reference and you'll know what I'm talking about. But again, it's just adding a nice little break in between the bottom of the lip and the bottom of the chin. So speaking of the chin, I'm just going to go ahead and reinforce that. Same on this side. Again, guys, don't worry about smudging your drawings. It just adds a bit more character to your drawing to see those smudge marks. It makes it feel like a living being created the drawings rather than you know, a computer. And I'm not against computer art. I teach courses in computer and digital art as well. One last thing I'm going to do here to the side. Remember the connections from the side of the eye, especially the eyelashes. If we're putting kind of a makeup scenario there, then I can kind of connect that whole area, which goes right up into, remember the bulging skin that happens right up here. And then it goes more into shadow over here. So that's why I kind of left that lighter, because it's kind of bulging out, kind of like the lips, but just not as prominent. So just, you know, look for areas to just reinforce the darks, erase out where you want more lights to happen. And so that's basically it. That is our face drawing. Hopefully you guys got enough to then start just doing a bunch of face drawings and just getting really good at it. So in future courses, I will be talking about, okay, how do we draw this head from 3/4? How do we draw from the side? These same rules will still apply, but things change. We'll get into perspective. We'll get into just the different technicalities of drawing and visual perception and all that good stuff. But this is enough for you guys to get started and really rock your face drawings. I appreciate you guys watching this, and I'll see you guys in the next course.